I'd like to talk to you today about writing a story that has something to say. So, when you're writing a novel, it should be about something. And when the reader is finished reading your story, they should know exactly what your story is about. We're going to talk about that today.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel for Just Meeting. I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author, and I'm here on Fridays to give you some writing tips to help you hopefully write your story. So today let's talk about writing a story that matters, a story that touches readers' hearts and touches them emotionally. Now, sometimes in interviews, I'm asked, like, who's your favorite author? And I have a really hard time with that. I should have three or four of them in my mind that I can talk about and I can say, because I'm always sort of stunned and it's like, who is my favorite author? Oh my God! And the reason that I do that is because I like so many writers and so many different types of books, and just to narrow it down to like who's your favorite, who has had the most impact on you is really difficult, except that I'm going to say that one of my top writers, that I love and that I think has had an impact on my writing, is John Steinbeck. So why Steinbeck? Because he wrote books that mattered, right? Books that really touched readers' hearts, and they were about something bigger than the story. It wasn't just the story, it wasn't just the plot. It was deeper, and there was a lot more. Now, as far as writing, this classics are different than commercial fiction, right? So you have to have a little bit more patience with them. They're written in a different time period. He has way too many words. They're very simple words. So he's a very simple writer. He doesn't have complicated vocabulary. And he overwrites. He just writes a lot, he overwrites the sentences, just could be short and could be more concise. But we can't judge older writing with today's commercial fiction and our short attention span. So, just leaving that aside, I love his stories because they are so significant. And because I like him so much, I've read not only many of his books, but I've also read one of his nonfiction books where he talks about writing. It's actually like journal entries, and I think this was published after his death by his family, and it was journal entries that he was writing, like little letters that he was writing to his agent, I believe. And it was all about writing his novel East of Eden. And reading through that, it goes through his process. Like, what does he do every day? He tells his agent, well, today I did this. And after reading through the various journal entries, the various letters that he's writing to his agent, you see, or at least, I could see, like, how completely dull it is to be a writer, right? So every day he does the same thing. He has his certain pencils and his paper, and he writes, and he has his routine where he writes, and then he spends time with his family, and then he comes back, and when he's not writing, he's not really happy, and he's kind of can't wait to come back to his story. So it's very dull, right? So reading through these journal entries is very dull, because that's what we are as writers. We're really not that exciting a group of people, right? We just really love to write. But what I did get out of these journal entries, that I love it, I'm glad that I read them, was his love and his passion for East of Eden. So East of Eden, if you haven't read it, it's really a story. It's very long and complicated, and it follows these two brothers, but it's basically a story of good and evil. And some people have compared it to like the Cain and Abel story, right? The good brother and the bad brother, and a lot of the characters that were there, just very, very similar to, there's a lot of references to that biblical story. But what I love, right? What I really like about what he wrote and about the story itself, is just his passion for it. So every time that he comes back and he's had his writing day, and now he's writing the letter to his agent, he tells him how much he hopes that this is an epic novel. Like he really, really cares about what he's writing, and he wants to show the good versus evil. That there's bad in everybody, but there's also a good, right? There's also a good nature to us. So he explores that evil, sort of selfish nature that we all have. But he also looks at how we can also be very loving and good. And we have both sides of those characters, right? We have that. And he really, really wants to show it. He's really worried about making sure that each character is portraying what he wants them to portray. So he really, really cares about his story. And he hopes that the reader will see that through reading this story, the reader will get that same feeling that he, what he's trying to say with these characters and with this story. Grapes of Wrath is the same, right? Grapes of Wrath is a different story. It takes place during the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl era. And with this story, what he does is he brings attention to the plight of the migrant worker, right? So we follow the Joad family. They're farmers, and they have to leave their home in Oklahoma because there's nothing will grow. It's after a drought. That's why we have the Dust Bowl, because there's just years and years of drought. And they come out to California and get taken advantage of, and there's all kinds of things that happen to them. And he brings attention to what happens to people, right, that are migrant workers, and it really opens your eyes to the poverty and the injustices that happen. And one of the themes of Grapes of Wrath is that life is this journey that is filled with obstacles, right? So that's what the feeling that you come away with. And but you see all the other stuff too, the poverty and the what it was like for Americans in the struggle during the Great Depression, and the poverty and the injustice, all of that, right? So there's deep things to think about. It's a thought. All his books are thought provoking, and that's what makes them wonderful, right? And that's what makes him. We still read them. That's why they read them in schools, right? And that's why he's considered such a great writer, because he's writing things that matter, things that people can relate to, that we can talk about, that we can think about, that we can have discussions over. So anyhow, this is why he is probably one of my favorite writers. So next time somebody asks me like, who's your favorite writer, I'm going to have to say John Steinbeck, right? So what do I want to talk to you about today? I want to talk to you about writing stories that matter, writing stories that touch people's lives. Now, we're not all writing classics, right? We're not writing classics. Most of us probably are not. Most of us are writing commercial fiction, but that doesn't mean that you're still not going to write deeper stories that have some significance to them. And they should. Even if you're writing something that is light, there should be something significant in that story that the reader can take away with them when they're finished reading your book. You want to take your readers on an emotional journey that's going to take them, leave them feeling that they experienced something significant. And one way to do this, one way to write impactful stories, is to think about what matters to you. We all have something that's important to us. We all have something that matters to us, right? So for some of us, it might be the environment. For others, it might be there's too much crime in the streets these days, right? For others, it might be like the educational system. There's just something wrong with it. It's just not working, right? Kids are not learning. Kids do not love to be in school. I was actually just talking to my son about this today. Like, why do our schools look like, I don't know, prisons in a way, right? They look terrible. They're horrible buildings. There's nothing inspiring. It's like the place where the kids are supposed to learn and be excited to go to, and they're not. So anyhow, that's something I'll write about someday, because it's something that I care about. So what is it that you care about? What is it that makes you feel passionate? Because that's a good place to start. It's a good place to say, okay, this is something I really care about. And it's something that I can add to my story because I have something to say here. And I think that it can be something interesting that can be part of my story. It doesn't have to be the whole story, but it can be something that is part of your story that makes your reader think and that your characters can care about as well. So think about those issues and think about how can you weave those into your story. Again, you don't want it to be part of your whole plot. You don't want to hit the reader over the head with these issues, right? It doesn't. You don't want to do that because that's no fun. People don't read stories to, for that, right? They get enough of that in real life, but it becomes a deeper book, right? So it becomes a more interesting book and less one-dimensional, less about one thing, if there's something else going on as well. So yeah, Steinbeck wrote a story about this family that is moving to California because they can no longer support themselves in Oklahoma, and they can't farm anymore. That's the story. Is we're moving from here to there, and we're going to get a new life. That's the story. But that really wasn't all of it, right? He managed to put other things in there that were important by showing the injustices, showing the struggle, showing the pain, and all of that. That was part of their journey. Okay, so let's say that you're thinking, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to write about pain and struggle, and I don't want to put anything very deep into my story. I'm writing a romance. Okay, so then what do you do? Okay, so you want to still search inside yourself. You're writing a romance, fine. Why are you writing that? So ask yourself, why am I writing this story? Why do I care about this story? Why did I pick this story? Why am I writing about this theme or whatever it may be? And kind of search deep inside yourself. Do a little meditation, do a little deep thinking, and ask yourself, like, why? So let's say that you're writing about just a romance about maybe two high school sweethearts that meet up again. I love those second chance at romance stories. So maybe that's what it is, right? It's a story where your hero and your heroine are meeting again and falling in love, or they're falling in love again, right? So why is that story important to you? Why did you choose that type of romance? Maybe because deep inside you feel that we always, that second chances are important. Maybe you feel that we never really quite get over that first love. And if we all had a chance to do it again years later, it would work out. I don't know why you chose that story, right? But you do. You know why you chose that type of romance. And ask yourself why, like deep inside, what can we say about this story that will touch the reader? So it comes down to really, kind of understanding yourself a little bit better too, right? So understanding why you're choosing the type of story. If you write a crime, books about crime and suspense and stuff, why are you writing that type of story? Maybe you want to believe that justice prevails, and even though it doesn't in real life, maybe in the fictional world does, and that's important to you to show that. So ask yourself, spend some time with yourself, right? And saying, why do I write this? Why am I writing romances instead of suspense? Why am I writing suspense instead of horror? Why am I writing this type of story? What is it that I want to say to my reader? Because if you know that, you will write a better story. You'll write a richer story, and it will be, it will translate, and the reader will get that. The third way that you can create a story that has something to say is by writing a story that has a theme. So again, Steinbeck, I'm using him as the example here. He had good versus evil, the powerlessness of man. He had, life is a constant struggle. All of these are themes that appeared in his books. So you don't have to write about an issue if that's just not your thing, but you can write about a theme, and what do you have to say about that theme? What do you have to say about life, about youth, about love? What is it that you want to, what is it your story is saying about that theme or about that concept? So remember that themes are these concepts. There are these recurring concepts that we see again and again in various stories, right? So And love is just a concept. Love is not a theme, right? But something like love changes a bitter heart. Now that's a theme, right? That's something that your story will show. So it's not just about love, but what are you saying about love? That's your theme. So that can be a different way to deepen your story, to make your story about more than just the plot. Pausing for a second to let you know about a couple of courses that I've created. If you're a beginning writer and you want some help with your book, I just want to let you know that I do have a basic course on how to write, and I'm going to post it below. And if you're not a beginning writer, but you are more established and you're ready to publish your work, you have your novel written, I also have a publishing course. And I will also post it below, so take a look at it. Maybe they'll be just what you're looking for. All right, let's go back to the video now. So just to review, then there are 3 ways that you can deepen your story, make it about more than just the story. One is to have some deeper issue, right? Some deeper societal issue. The second way is to look inside yourself, right? And say, what is important to me that I want to talk about? Or why am I writing this type of story? And the third way is to think of the theme of the story. What is the theme of that particular story? What is it that you want your reader to take away about that theme? So those 3 ways are the ways that you can deepen your story and make it about something more than just the book or more than just the plot. So now I'm not saying that you want to be completely obvious. Okay, I read a book just recently about an author that I usually like, but but I didn't like this particular book because it was full of just kind of moralizing political ideology, and it doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. I don't really want to read a fiction novel about that. I get enough of that everywhere else, right? So I don't want it in my story. Not that I would have minded if it had been done differently, but it wasn't done well, and I just didn't like it, right? So the reader doesn't want to be, again, hit over the head with your ideas and and the issues, right? So the reason that Steinbeck is so good is because he doesn't do that. He makes it about the story. Through the story, he's showing us these things. We as readers are actually coming up with our own, we see it through his story, right? We come up with, wow, I can see how unfair these migrant workers are being treated. And, life sure is tough for some people. And, during this time in American history, there were families that were super poor. We as readers are seeing that. Steinbeck isn't saying that, and he's not putting it really in the voice of the characters. The characters are just experiencing things, and we're watching them experience things. That's what you want to do. You don't want characters to say really what the author wants them to say, right? Because then it's just not a good read. A really good example of this, one that I think I've mentioned before, but I just really like it. So there was a movie back in, I think it was 2002, I'm not positive, but it was Sandra Bullock and Hugh Grant, and the movie was called 2 Weeks Notice. If you haven't seen it, really cute movie, you should see it. So he is this rich like developer, right, in New York City. I think they are. Yeah, definitely New York City. Definitely. And she's an environmental lawyer. Yeah, activist lawyer. And so she's trying to save this community center. He wants to tear it down, build some big buildings and everything. And it ends up where, of course, she ends up working for him, and it's a romance. It's a romantic comedy. But there's this one scene that I really love where they're flying in a helicopter around New York City, and he's talking about the Chrysler Building. He's giving her a little bit of history, like who created it, and just a little bit of history about the area. And then she is actually admiring the city and saying, how beautiful it is, and look at all these buildings. It really is beautiful, even though she doesn't like all this, right? Even though she doesn't like all this development. She has this moment where she admits, like, wow, this is amazing. Some people have created some really great things. And she has this line where she says, it's amazing what dreams and a lot of money can do or can achieve, or something like that. And he says, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And she says, yeah. And she says, and you're part of that. You can use your money for good, or you can use it for evil. So it didn't have to be this like overly preachy kind of thing. She just kind of brings it back to You know, you can do good things with your money. You don't have to tear down a community center, right? You don't, she doesn't even have to say that, right? She just, through what she's saying, she's sort of admitting that there's some beauty as well to the city and the buildings. But, you know, you can also use your money and your dreams to do something good for people. So it didn't have to be a big thing, right? It was just it was a little line. And that's good because that's what you should do. That's what you want to do in your stories, to make your point, right? To deepen your story, but not to like chase away your readers and say, oh, I don't want to read this author anymore because I don't really want to hear about all this other stuff. So do it the way that it was done in this movie. You have that deeper message of, you know, you can have power and you can still do good, right? And that's all it had to be. So think about how you can deepen your story. What can you add? What do you care about? What issues are important to you? What themes do you want to focus on? And know that as you're writing your story. And if you do that, if you know it as you're writing your story before you actually write your story, your scenes will be better, they'll be richer, and you'll know where you're going with your story, right? You won't have these scenes that don't make any sense or that don't really connect to your main message. And you'll have a better and stronger book. So I hope this helps you. I hope it gives you something to think about. If you liked this, again, remember to hit the like button and to subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified next week when I share another video. Thank you for being here. See you next week.